I can reach your hand. I can liberate you. I know you're alive, but in my heart I've said goodbye. Tonight I'm sleepless. I'm sleepless. I'm sleepless. I'm sleepless, sleepless. I'm sleepless, sleepless. I'm sleepless, sleepless, yeah.
Tonight we are in London, UK. Sold out, 1,500 people over here at Electric Brixton. It's a pretty big deal for us. It's the second biggest show of the entire world tour. That means it's bigger than anything we did back home outside of Sydney. Why this is a really big deal? Because last time we were in the UK headlining, a bunch of the venues got downgraded, no one came to the shows. And this time round, we've been packing rooms out across the whole country, and it feels fucking awesome.
While we never for a second questioned whether or not we would continue, a lot of people in the wider industry stopped believing in us, and I could tell. It was so obvious to me that they all thought that we were done. But when I'm faced with a severe adversity, I go into the mindset of that within all of these, kicks in the guts that life can deal you, there's always an opportunity.
I just remember being so nervous though, like just thinking how, I think we were all on the same page, like how do you recover from something like that? And we had like over 2,000 auditions that we sifted through. We found Marcus amongst all of them, and I think when we were looking at them, he all stood out to us because he had something that none of the other people had.
Wake up from the nightmare and become the dream.
So he was a clear winner to us. There wasn't anyone that was close to him, and on top of that, he was a local from the area. We were looking globally, but we found someone who was on our doorstep. And the craziest thing about it, to us, was the fact that his friends talked him into doing it.
Yeah, for me it was an amazing opportunity, but definitely a high pressure thing of coming into a band that's already been well established around the world and coming into a style of, I guess, lyric writing that I'd never really delved into, which I think was a big part of Northlane leading up to my joining.
That was his first time ever properly screaming in a band as well, so we weren't sure how that was going to work out, and there was definitely still a little bit of doubt. There's still a little bit of doubt in my mind. I don't think I ever actually came on board until know, a year into it or a year and a half into it, even though we're already writing music together and that sort of thing. It was still pretty fresh, but I believed in his ability, and I think that was kind of what settled any sort of nerves or feelings about it.
Well, with Node, I guess I had no real time to settle in and to understand what I wanted to do, what I wanted to bring to the band, and it was kind of just, we were just shuffling to get it done. We were just trying to get it out to kind of keep the Northlane train going. And then with Mesmer, it was cool because I was a lot more comfortable working with David Bendeth. He helped me, I guess, open up a bit more and bring back a bit of that confidence to talk about what I wanted to talk about. But even still, there's always something in me that was like, I could be doing a lot more, but I just don't have the confidence to do it. I guess there was maybe a fear of doing something and then it not being good enough and people kind of tearing it down or whatever. I think it's just a lot of second guessing in my own head that kind of brought me to feel like that.
I think we'd grown quite a lot as a band, and I think I'd gotten a lot more comfortable, but I still wasn't quite, at the point where I was ready to open it up about most of my own personal stuff, or I guess delve into something that might not be expected of Northlane.
We'd had complications with management, and during this period, management was shifted externally to internally. Josh took over management of the band, which was a huge step for him. Obviously, it's a big sort of role to take on.
So you get built up over the years, and you have confidence instilled in you by all the people that have really just turn out to be blowing smoke up your ass. As soon as things start to not go as well as they expected, those friends you thought you had take a step back and the relationships start to fizzle. We had an album not do as well as was expected of us, and then another one that followed. We had a whole touring cycle that didn't do as well as what was expected, and then our ticket sales were dropping, our merch sales were dropping, and the money that sustains the band comes from there. So it was like all of the things that we thought were sure about our trajectory and career were coming to a grinding halt. The first thing I regrettably had to do was, we had our first US tour in years booked with Tesseract, and my first order of business was cancelling that tour just because we couldn't afford to do it. The next thing I did was booked a show at the Roundhouse. And most people thought that the whole point of that was a launch for our live album, but it was to get our heads above water, and it did. It helped a lot. The live album was to help recoup on Mesmer, because at that point we still owed money to the label.
I think a lot had happened just before December of 2017, and we'd had a couple of blows, and we were feeling pretty low, possibly the lowest we'd ever felt in our careers. And I think it's one of those things that, like, I think everybody feels, or like if you're in that position, everyone's feeling it, but no one's talking about it. And there was a night in Europe where we went out. We had a show the next day and that was okay, but then the next day after that, for whatever reason, I was feeling just especially cranky, and we walked off the stage at the end of the second last song, so we were coming back on for the encore, and something happened. I hit my head on something, and I took it out on Josh, who was in front of me, and I blamed it on him for not walking off the stage quicker, and it evolved into a very physical thing, which I'm not especially proud of. We ended up just canning the show at that point. We didn't even walk on, and we had to have a talk about what had happened, and I suppose it was at that point that I told the guys that I was feeling like super, super low, and it was a weird thing to talk about because as someone who sees themselves as like the director, the driving force, at least musically, behind the band, it was hard to show vulnerability and say that like, I'm not okay, this is what's up, and I think this is why this has happened. And I suppose that was like the turning point of us being like really honest with each other, and for me anyway, and learning from it, and just building the next step, building the next evolution of Northlane, which was a very angry, very dark, and I mean, it's always been moody, but it's coming from not trying to be moody or trying to be dark. It actually came from a super dark place where I thought I just didn't want to be on the planet anymore. I didn't want to be alive.
Yeah, at that point I was kind of already questioning my position in the band, and I was like, is this what I want to do? Am I able to, is this something I can do and be happy and be able to just live my life as well on top of that? And yeah, I remember for a long time it was really weighing on me, like, how am I going to survive, also enjoy doing this, but then also in the back of my head it's like, well, I can't leave, like that's something I could never do. The boys have already gone through this already, and to build this all back up for me to just bring it crashing down again, that was always something that just fucked with me a lot. And luckily, like, we got through that and everything has been looking up since then, but yeah, everything was definitely in limbo for a while. That, yeah, had no idea how we were gonna, sustain this.
Brendan's arrival into Northlane was, I think, at a very important time when the rest of us were probably not in the greatest place after Milo's departure. Milo's reason for leaving probably resonated with a lot of us. Made us, in turn, question what we were doing, maybe. Which is only natural, I think. Once you're doing this with a bunch of people for so long, once one person goes, you know what, I've had enough, I want to stay home and do my own thing, you can't help but not resonate with that, I think. It's like, of course, that makes sense. Like, this isn't the easiest life to lead. Which only personally led me into a place where I felt quite sad, and I questioned things to do with what we were doing. Once you see someone else sort of walk away and they do it happily.
Sprinkle.
Children everywhere.
Losers everywhere, mate.
We can fucking go out there, show those whatever 150 mates out there what a fucking good time is, huh?
Yeah, stop fucking running your mouth, mate.
Mate, if
hang
you
on your
don't
fucking jacket, get out there and show them what you're made of.
Yeah. we just hit him up, and then he told us that he had some dream the night before about him playing in Northlane, which is extremely bizarre, but not bizarre at the same time. I feel like if you believe in those sorts of things, like things sometimes are meant to be, meant to happen.
The night before John messaged me, I had like a dream that I was playing third guitar in Northlane, and Alex was still in the band, and then not even 12 hours later I got a message from John being like, hey, would you join Northlane full time? And I didn't even like ask what instrument, I just said yeah. First time I met him, we just had a night where we all like hung out all night, and we went, they had a hotel, and we pushed all the beds together and just like slept, had like a slumber party on one bed. And that was kind of just a good sign of how I would get along with Marcus, because I already knew that I got along with the rest of the guys, but it was like a good sign to show how quick we could get along.
Within like the brief amount of time we got to hang out, we'd already gotten super close, which is pretty rare for me as well, to be able to click with someone pretty instantly. So yeah, we threw him a line, and he was keen, as we see now. It really changed everything, really. From the point he joined the band, the whole energy of our band was so much more positive and so much more, just a lot more friendly, I guess. A lot friendlier than it had ever been before.
So when we started writing for the music that would become Alien, John was in a really dark place, and all of the music was coming out really dark and brooding and quite angry and gritty.
It was pretty clear that the tone of all of it was a lot darker than it had been in the past, and I guess that opened up the possibility to start delving into this kind of stuff.
Like anyone who writes music, the music that they write is a direct reflection of their current mental state, living state, and yeah, I guess the last year hasn't been great for whatever reason. I started looking into seeking help just for my own benefit. I know being a musician isn't easy, and I feel like a lot of people would even say that being in a touring band, that does relatively well, like you've got nothing to be concerned about or worry about, but living it is a completely different thing. And I think living and working within the music industry at the moment, while everything's changing, is possibly harder than it's ever been. So yeah, the music definitely, there's some heavier tracks on the album, which they're from a dark place, but it's cathartic. It's cathartic to do it, If this album was to flop, then we wouldn't be doing this anymore. So there was our livelihoods on the line. It has to do well.
I wanted to make sure there was a song that, still understands that it's not that easy, and it's easy enough to write in a song. I was raised in hell and I made it out myself, but it's not as black and white as that. It is a difficult way to be brought up, and a difficult thing to escape if you're not surrounded by the right people, or you don't have the right mindset to, I guess, battle that. And that's where the chorus comes in. The whole verse is saying, I know what it's like to have these opportunities, or to want to do different things and try and make it out, but someone can so quickly bring you down and completely stop you in your tracks. I don't know. I think it's important to not just always think everything's going to be okay, or like it's great to have that outlook, but it's not always going to be like that. And it was important to me to kind of show both sides of it, that it's not just a matter of doing it. There's so much that comes with trying to escape that life. You might upset the people around you, your family and stuff, as much as they might have done to kind of put you in this position. It is hard still to face that. So yeah, that's why that song is important for me to get out.
Marcus and I started working on lyrics and vocal melodies and stuff like that. Always comes after the music for the most part. So we sat down and we started working on it and writing in the same fashion we did, and the songs were just way too intense for any kind of topics that we'd covered before, and it just didn't feel right. It felt disingenuous to go back there. I said to him, I think this is the time where we really delve into what happened. And when I said that to him, I had no idea of the severity or scope of it. I knew a few things, but I didn't know what really happened. And he said to me, I don't think anyone would care.
I think that there's a lot of people that had similar situations as Marcus living or growing up, and I think there's a lot of albums that I cherish are very heart-driven, whether it's something that they've gone through growing up or whether it's something they see in the world that they really want to change. I think that that's how music should be. I think that there's a lot more attachment to it, and you can feel the energy when there's emotion.
The gravity of what Marcus had written these songs about really sunk into me when it was about 3 days before we left for our US tour. He called me on the phone crying to tell me that his mother had passed away, and I could barely believe it, and it was one of the biggest curveballs we've ever really been served as a band, because we worked so hard to finally turn things around, and we were, starting to see signs of success again that we hadn't seen in years. I realized, because of the nature of what we'd written these songs about, it could so easily come all undone. What I did straight away was I called all of our publicists and cancelled all of our upcoming press, and I did everything I could to protect him, to do my job both as his friend and his manager, to give him whatever he needed. And I gave him the option of cancelling this world tour. And that was something that at that point in time I really thought was actually going to happen. I didn't think we'd be going on the road with this record. I didn't think we'd be touring it around the world. I thought that these life events were so significant that nobody could be resilient enough to go through with what he has just gone through, kind of staring at the barrel at the end of this. But he's the most resilient and hardest person I've ever met in my life, and I can't ever fathom being in his shoes.
I was happy to go, obviously, but I was obviously very concerned for my friend, I personally would want to stay home, and there were a lot of times where I wasn't sure if I should give space or be there, and I don't know. It was a very tough situation, and not for me, obviously. Well, it was tough for me, but obviously a lot tougher for my brother.
Yeah, about a week before we kicked off the US tour, I found out my mum passed away. She'd obviously struggled with a lot of things that my dad did as well, but in her later years, I guess, continued to struggle with alcoholism, and it was something that she just couldn't really escape, I guess. And I'd not really spoken to her very much in the last 2 or 3 years. There's a lot of stuff that I was really angry at her about and really upset about. There was, she didn't really understand, and I think a lot of that came with her issues with alcohol. But still, it's something that was so hard to deal with, and something that I couldn't, I had to separate myself from her if I was ever going to get out and, I guess, do what I wanted to do and live the life that I wanted to live, like a normal, kind of boring life. And when the album came out, she'd messaged me a couple of times, and as opposed to kind of understanding where I was coming from and seeing the damage that our upbringing had done to both me and my sister, she just was angry. She was angry that I would air our dirty laundry out in public as opposed to talking to her about it, even though it was never really possible to do that. But despite all that, there's always, a part of you that hopes that, there's going to be a change, and that she'd be able to see all of what's happened and hopefully try and make a change in herself as well, or at least have an understanding of it. And like I said, then a week before we left for our US tour, she passed away, and I never got to, see any of that, but also I never got to really talk to her again. I didn't properly talk to her in years, and I just won't get that chance. And that really was one of the hardest tours I've ever had to do.
One of the most incredible, I don't know if incredible is the right word, but moving moments we've ever had on stage for me was when we played Sleepless for the first time at our show at the Roundhouse, knowing what events had transpired not too long before that and what the song was about. I could tell he was struggling when I got up there and started my part in the song, and by the time the song had finished, he was in tears, and he just kind of soldiered on through the rest of the encore like nothing was wrong at all, and I could tell on the inside he was just bleeding out. It was one of the bravest moments that I've ever witnessed.